It's been 4 years and next year it will be 5 years since we got our last mainline or any Far Cry game. But it does seem that Ubisoft have huge plans for the Far Cry franchise moving forward, which we'll go into right now with all the new updates we've gotten recently and over this past year. So the first thing to point out is that the next generation of Far Cry starts not with just one, but 2 games. I've actually compiled all this information from Insider Gaming, where we know that the current Far Cry development saga began with a single project codenamed Talisker under the helm of Dan Hay. However, following Hay's departure from Ubisoft, where he joined Blizzard Entertainment, the project was split into 2 separate games early in development. The mainline entry, now codenamed Project Blackbird, which is going to be the Far Cry 7 game we all are anticipating, and a multiplayer extraction shooter codenamed Project Maverick, both originated from this single game, which explains why they have very similar shared design elements. Both games are being developed primarily at Ubisoft Montreal with support from various studios, and both are making a significant technical shift from the Dunia engine to Snowdrop. Let's start with Far Cry 7 Project Blackbird, the story game. So the premise of this game is going to be that Far Cry 7 centers around a non-linear story focus on rescuing the player's kidnapped family. The game's plot revolves around a wealthy family which has been kidnapped by a conspiracy group called the Sons of Truth, who have been performing hallucinogenic experiments on animals and children. The player has 72 hours in-game time, which equates to 24 hours in real time to rescue their family, with the timer reflected in-game by a watch worn on the player's wrist. Crucially, the timer can be paused when the player enters one of their safe houses. Now, in terms of the non-linear structure, family members do not need to be rescued in order, and some family members can be killed, which impacts the story. To complete the game 100%, all family members must be rescued safely, with the ultimate goal being to take down the Sons of Truth. Now, there will be a new interrogation mechanic in this game, where to find family members, Far Cry 7 introduces this new interrogation mechanic where outcomes vary sometimes. Enemies will give up information sometimes they'll lie and stay quiet or even escape. Now, an alleged leak early in development suggested that the game would be called Far Cry Rise and take place in a fictitious tropical island called Kim-san in the Yellow Sea next to Korea, and sources told Insider Gaming that this leak is actually entirely inaccurate. Now, both Blackbird and Maverick represent Ubisoft's attempt to move away from that traditional Far Cry formula that has defined the series for years. I think with Far Cry 5 and especially with Far Cry 6, that was the massive complaint, was the fact that Far Cry 6 was just so and too similar to the previous games. That's why they are making this massive shift, which will break the formula. Now, with this game comes an enhanced movement systems. Both games feature significant overhauls to their movement systems, including tactical, sprinting, sliding, vaulting, and more. These similarities stem from both projects originally being the same game, with shared mechanics bleeding into one another. Now, in terms of the inventory and looting changes, the inventory system and looting mechanics from the extraction-based shooter have also influenced Blackbird. According to one source, I'd argue it makes a lot of sense given your desperation to rescue your family. Now, several sources who have experienced playtesting told Insider Gaming that the game played great and changes up the traditional Far Cry formula in numerous ways, from overall gameplay to movement mechanics. Now, the next Far Cry game doesn't seem to be going as smoothly as Project Blackbird Far Cry 7, as this game, Project Maverick, is the extraction shooter, where the original vision of this game was that Maverick was pitched as an extraction-based multiplayer shooter set in the Alaskan wilderness, featuring mechanics such as permadeath, a backpack system, and contract. Screenshots and gameplay provided to Insider Gaming under the condition that they wouldn't go out to the public show lootable chests, extraction zones, and players battling not just other players but also animals like wolves and bears and harsh weather conditions and AI enemy patrols. Interestingly, survival against the extreme wilderness like weather, wildlife, etc. appears to be more of a priority than worrying about other players. Now, the Alaskan setting may have roots dating back years. A 2015 survey asked players to select their preferred location for a possible Far Cry follow-up in the future, with one being a Far Cry game in a remote Alaska about surviving extreme wilderness, so it seems like they're actually doing that now. But as of March 2025, Insider Gaming exclusively reported that Project Maverick had been rebooted. According to several sources, the writing was on the wall for months, with the final nail in the coffin coming after the dedicated tech team called Talisker moved from Maverick to be fully dedicated to Blackbird in late December to ensure the project stayed on track, which also shows that Project Blackbird will be coming first, and it's likely that Project Maverick will come later down the line. Now, Ubisoft Montreal and Ubisoft Sherbrooke are taking the multiplayer game back to prototyping. Ubisoft Berlin, which was assisting on development, saw around a dozen developers move to Blackbird and another dozen move to another project. However, approximately 50 developers were left without an assigned project and would likely be placed on viability. The exact reason for Maverick's reboot remains unclear, but the decision appears to be a part of Ubisoft's new strategy to streamline its teams and projects amid the company's struggles. Now, internally, while Ubisoft Montreal and its supporting studios on Blackbird are optimistic, concerns over Maverick and its future loom. Ubisoft has been attempting to create a Far Cry multiplayer experience for the best part of a decade, and we actually saw these types of extraction-like missions within Far Cry 6. So if you go back and play Far Cry 6 and those extraction missions, you can kind of feel how this game would likely be like. And while an extraction shooter could make sense for the Far Cry universe, it was ultimately greenlit to chase trends. And we saw this again with Rainbow Six Extraction, which didn't even do too well itself. So it is very possible, just like X-Defiant, this project will be abandoned. The extraction genre hasn't attracted the player numbers the industry thought it would. Defiant's recent cancellation and subsequent layoffs felt like the beginning of a downward spiral to some staff, with Yves Guillemot internal memo following that announcement not inspiring much confidence. Several sources within various studios working on both projects feel it's unlikely that Maverick will do well, as the game appears to be capitalizing on the Far Cry brand rather than offering anything unique. I don't think the Far Cry brand carries that much weight to where a lot of people would hop on board, play an extraction shooter. It will likely feel the same as Rainbow Six Extraction and really all the other extraction games on the market. Now, we did get official confirmation about the company's direction in September 2025, where Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot confirmed at Saudi Arabia's new global sports conference that the goal with the Far Cry series is to have more multiplayer focused experiences. Guillemot stated that the goal on Far Cry, it's really to bring the multiplayer aspects more predominantly pushed so that it can also be played for a long time by players. This comment was referring to Project Maverick, which could mean that Project Maverick hasn't been cancelled and there's still a huge amount of plans for it, as I don't think there will be much multiplayer aspect within Far Cry 7, the story game Project Blackbird, so it does seem that Project Maverick is still in the plans for Ubisoft. Now, the development timeline and current status of these projects, if we look back at the original schedule, both games were originally scheduled for fall 2025 release, but their release dates have been pushed back internally from 2025 to 2026 due to complexities in development. Now, the current projections as of early 2025, Far Cry 7 Blackbird has already started playtesting. However, some on the Blackbird project feel a 2026 release date is still fairly optimistic, with the project bloating in headcount and budget. Teams currently working on Blackbird including Ubisoft Montreal, Ubisoft Berlin, Ubisoft Anaki, Red Storm and the Talisker team. Given Ubisoft's inconsistency with the meeting internal deadlines, the actual release could be even further out. Now, what this actually means for Far Cry, Ubisoft appears to be trying to break its own trend of chasing trends with these Far Cry projects. While both games represent steps in the right direction, they also constitute considerable risk for the publisher. The shift to Snowdrop engine, the non-linear storytelling with time pressure mechanics, enhanced movement systems, and the troubled extraction shooter all point to a franchise attempting to reinvent itself after years of following the same familiar formula. Whether these bold changes will resonate with Far Cry's established fan base or attract new players remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: Ubisoft is betting big on changing what Far Cry means in the modern gaming landscape. And I, of course, am very excited for Far Cry 7 Project Blackbird, and I actually have no desire to see Project Maverick. It is very interesting that Yves Guillemot did mention Far Cry and pushing predominantly multiplayer aspects, which again, I don't think he's talking about Far Cry 7 single player, but the extraction shooter. But with how all the other extraction shooters are doing on the market and their previous attempts with Rainbow Six Extraction and even their first person shooter with X Defiant, I don't see how they think that this is a good idea. Maybe they can just scrap it, kind of have it as a small mode within Far Cry 7, kind of how they had those missions within Far Cry 6, but we'll have to wait and find out. It does seem like it's still on track to come. It's definitely not coming in fall 2026 or anytime in 2026. Rather, I do hope that Far Cry 7, we do see that next year, along with Ghost Recon Project Over. But probably 2027 is likely where we may get this Project Maverick Extraction game if it hasn't been completely overhauled, which it does seem to be going through a massive reboot phase. But if anything, it's likely that 2026 will be the official announcement of Far Cry 7, and we probably will get a teaser or maybe even a gameplay trailer maybe in the second quarter of 2026. Go ahead and check out my Ghost Recon breakdown. And guys, I wanted to announce the Witch Hunt collection, which is going to be the first collection that will be available on the Balboa Club store when it launches. This specific collection is inspired by the Witcher series and the dark fantasy genre. This is a brand that I've really wanted to make for a long time. I didn't just want to make merch, but I wanted to make something special, something that mixes the really cool designs of the wrestling world with the things that we love the most, video games. And of course, the first design had to be inspired by my favorite game of all time, The Witcher 3. So this is something special that I've created for you. I want you to join the club, and I will announce when the store is about to launch through this channel. Now we're even going to TikTok and Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out, God bless, and join the Balboa Club today. Bye bye.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.